This is a video for Comparative Social Policy Unit 7.8, looking at generating macro spending figures. In this short video, we will take you through the process of extracting data from the OECD database. This is freely available and contains reliable and internationally comparable online data. For our purpose, this is a reliable source of both contemporary and statistical data. There are two types of data to draw your attention to. One, core popular queries, which contains a variety of contemporary data. The other, core data by theme, and this is the one we're interested in for this exercise. As you can see, there are a variety of themes to choose from, but we're selecting social and welfare statistics as we're concerned with generating macro spending figures. Or put more simply, looking at what governments spend on social and welfare policies. For this example, we'll look at social protection. We want to look at aggregated data, or total data for social protection. And the data set we shall use is SOCEX. Moving across the data table, there are a number of variables to choose from. For source, we have selected public, which is a default, and this includes all government spend for social and welfare expenditure. On the branch label, we have chosen total, but again, we want to look at aggregated data. On the type of expenditure, we have chosen total again, and again, this is the default. This includes cash benefits and benefits in kind. In other words, cash transfers and services. We want to keep the type of program as total rather than disaggregating the data. And finally, unit. We have selected percentage of gross domestic product, or GDP. As we noticed in Unit 6.6, if we want to compare the amount of spend or effort between richer and poorer countries, percent of GDP is a good option. For example, if we want to compare the USA and Sweden, although the USA has a much larger GDP than Sweden, a smaller proportion is actually spent on public expenditure, and this measure presents, therefore, a clearer comparison. Now, for this exercise, we will initially look at the 18 countries used in S.B. Anderson's 1993 Worlds of Welfare Capitalism. So in order to select these, we click on the Countries tab, and we need to uncheck those countries that fall outside this sample. Then click View Data. Next, we want to choose a time range for our sample, and to do so, we click on the Year tab. For this example, we will choose the years from 1980 to 2001. Next, we will choose the time periods. And here we have chosen 5-year intervals from 1980 to 2001. So we need to unclick the ones we don't want to use. So 5-year intervals, and the final one will have a 6-year intervals, which takes us firmly into this century. And then next, we need to click View Data to go back to the data set. Now we have the correct sample of 18 countries in our chosen time range. To be able to represent this data as a chart, however, we need to use Excel. And to do this, we simply click on the Export tab and export to an Excel sheet, which we can save and return to as and when. Whilst the OECD database is very good at exporting the data to Excel, which is very handy, what it doesn't do is unfortunately produce ready-made charts for us to examine. So there is a bit of work to do once you reach Excel, but we won't go into that in this example. But the main task can be summarised as selecting the type of chart. We will go for a line chart since these are the most useful for presenting data over time. Then you need to name the chart axes and the labels. But as I say, instead of taking you through these steps in Excel, we will present you with a ready-made line chart. So as you can see, the y-axis is presented as percent of GDP, and the x-axis is the year, the date and the time range. Now, as you can see, this is quite a busy chart and contains a good deal of data. But if we just look at one example, Sweden, we can see that Sweden consistently outspends all the other states in the sample. Until we reach the early 2000s. This is to be expected, as Sweden is a clear member of SB Andersson's Social Democratic World of Welfare. And this is characterised by higher social spending and higher degree of decommodification. Remember, we're looking at broadly the impact of globalisation on public social expenditure, and so actually the x-axis is important here. This can give us an indication of events that take place in history. So the UK, for example, has an increase in social expenditure in the 1980s. The reason for this is a large increase in unemployment during this time period. Remember, welfare systems are built upon cultural and historical foundations, so we need to bear this in mind when looking at this data range. I'll say a little bit more about this when looking at the next chart. And in the next chart, to make things easier for ourselves, we can reduce the sample to include a smaller number of the representatives of three worlds. But we need to make sensible choices. So I've opted for 6 states, 2 from SB Andersson's three worlds. So France and Germany for the corporatist world, Norway and Sweden for the social democratic, and finally the UK and USA for the liberal world. This may be a little clearer, but it is also perhaps a rather restricted range, but it will serve a purpose here. Now remember earlier I was saying the cultural and historical foundations of welfare states are important. Well, a good example of needing to take historical events into account is provided by Germany. As we can see, the level of welfare spend is relatively stable throughout the 1980s in Germany until we hit 1990. Why? Well, it is a simple explanation really. In 1989, the Berlin Wall came down and the former Soviet bloc broke up, and subsequently Germany reunified as one state, and the increase in public social expenditure in the 1990s is a result of reunification. So historical events are indeed important in relation to social expenditure. In this video, we have shown you how to extract macro expenditure figures from an OECD dataset and how to examine line charts. So having watched the video, we'd like you to think about the following questions. What does the data tell you in terms of commonalities and dissimilarities of the development of social expenditure since the 1980s? And does the data support the common notion of a convergent trend in a direction of a reduction of public welfare effort in the age of globalization?